me. She wants to kill me. You won't get her away. I'll get please someone. I'll get you. Don't stay away. They'll find them.
Benny had always believed marriage would lead her to a new family, a place where she could be loved, welcomed, and treated like a daughter. But after 4 years living as a daughter-in-law in the Adigbite family of Ogun State, she felt like she'd been surviving inside a silent battlefield. Her husband's family was the traditional Yoruba type, disciplined, orderly, and especially unforgiving toward their daughters-in-law. At the head of it was Mama Ronka, a silver-haired woman with eyes sharp enough to cut. She had never liked Benny, and she never tried to hide it. "You call this cooking? The meat is still raw. How do you take care of a child when she's getting skinnier every day? Useless, can't even give us a baby boy." Those words stabbed Benny's heart day after day. But she stayed silent, for her husband, for their little girl, for the hope, just a tiny spark that one day Mama Ronk might accept her. But that hope faded a little more each year. Benny was born and raised in Lagos, a fast-paced city where people spoke their mind and lived freely. But in Ogun, every word had to be measured. Every action could be labeled disrespectful. And to Mama Ronk, Benny was the perfect example of that rude city girl who doesn't know her place. She endured it. But her heart was covered in scars. That evening, the Ogun sky hung heavy, dark clouds pressing low over the red earth roof. In the small kitchen, Benny kept her head down as she washed the pots. Dinner wasn't even served yet when the complaining began. "After a long day, you expect this family to eat such bland soup?" Mama Ronk's voice pierced the air. Benny's lips tightened. "I'll fix the seasoning." "You say that every day," Mama Ronk sniffed. "Pathetic." Benny turned away. Her chest tightened. She tried to breathe. Then Mama Ronk's heavy footsteps approached behind her. "You know, Ronk, your husband's older sister, was 10 times better than you ever will be. Sons are treated like kings in this house. A daughter-in-law should know her place." Benny set the pot down a little too hard. Her shoulders trembled. "I've been trying my best, Mama," she whispered. "I never wanted conflict with you." "Trying?" Mama Ronk scoffed. "Trying, yet you can't give us a son? Trying, yet you keep this house a mess? Trying, while the whole family laughs at us because of you?" The words hit her where it hurt most. "I can't control whether I give birth to a boy or a girl," Benny said, raising her voice for the first time. Mama Ronk turned, eyes icy. "Only weak women say that." That was the last drop. Benny spun around, tears threatening to fall. "Mama, I've swallowed my pride for 4 years. I can't." But Mama Ronk cut her off, and what she said froze the entire house. "This family has never accepted your kind." The air vanished. The kitchen dimmed. Even the insects outside went silent. Benny stood still. Her ears rang. Her chest felt crushed under a weight. After a long moment, she managed to speak, voice trembling. "Mama, what kind of woman do you think I am?" Mama Ronk didn't blink. "The kind that brings trouble into a home. The kind that doesn't obey. The kind that can't give us an heir. The kind our ancestors would never bless." Benny laughed a broken, twisted sound. "I thought, at least Mama would understand. I left my family, left Lagos, gave up my job, tried to adapt to life here. But Mama never even saw me as a person." Just then, her husband Iodel walked in. He froze when he saw Benny's tear-stained face. "What's going on?" he asked. Benny opened her mouth, but Mama Ronk spoke first. She talked back to me. "Look at your wife." No respect for her elders. Benny clenched her fist so tight her nails broke the skin. "Mama said." "This house has never accepted me," she said, voice cracking. Iodel turned to his mother, stunned. "Mama, why would you say that?" "Because it's the truth," she replied coldly. Benny looked at her husband, hoping, begging for something. But he only sighed. Benny, don't blow things out of proportion. Mama just said it out of anger. Those words hit harder than any insult. Benny straightened up, speaking slowly. No, I can live in a house where even my own husband want to stand up for me. Iodel stiffened. What are you saying? Benny looked at him, at the woman who had tormented her for years, then toward the room where her little daughter was sleeping, completely unaware of the storm unfolding. I'm leaving, she said. I'm taking our daughter. And if one day Mama chooses to understand me, she knows where to find me. She walked out of the kitchen, out through the porch, out of the years of silent suffering. Mama Ronk simply watched, her eyes still cold. But when the door shut behind Benny, her chest grew unbearably heavy. For the first time, perhaps she understood. Some words can never be taken back. And some people, once they walk away, take all the peace in the home with them. The Ijibu market was as crowded as ever that day. The smell of dried fish, the spice of suya, the bargaining shouts, the sound of children running through the stalls together, they formed the familiar symphony of Ogun State. Benny walked through the crowd, holding a basket of freshly bought chicken, trying her best to avoid the prying eyes around her. In Ogun, news traveled faster than the Harmattan wind, and the fact that she hadn't given birth to a son had become the neighborhood's favorite gossip topic. She knew, she heard, but she stayed silent. Yet that afternoon, fate seemed determined to see how many more cracks her heart could bear. Mama Rock appeared suddenly at the far end of the market, her voice booming loudly enough for everyone to hear. Benny, why aren't you at home? You abandon your duties just to wander around like someone with no real work? Several people turned. Benny swallowed the lump in her throat. I just came to buy chicken for tonight's dinner. Dinner? Mama Ronk scoffed loudly. To cook that tasteless nonsense you make. Everyone in the house is sick of it. Vendors began exchanging glances. A few elderly women shook their heads. Everyone knew Mama Ronk was strict, but today, her tone was different, sharper, heavier. Benny stood still, gripping the basket handle until her knuckles turned white. Mama Ronk marched closer and pointed straight into her daughter-in-law's face in front of dozens of eyes. Then she said the words that brought the entire market to a halt. If you can't give us a son, you're nothing but bad luck. We've wasted our food feeding you. The moment stretched, breathless. Bargaining stopped. The chopping knife at the fish stall froze midair. A chicken darted across the path and someone stepped aside instinctively, but no one actually noticed. Benny stood there shattered. Her body shaking, her eyes burning. Her heart pounding like an Ugandan festival drum. She tried to inhale, but her lungs felt crushed. Her ears rang, her face burned. Tears gathered but refused to fall. She had never felt so small or so stripped of her dignity. A fish vendor whispered to the woman beside her. She's endured this for years. Everyone can see it. A man selling yams added quietly, It's not her fault she didn't have a son. Mama Rock heard. She spun toward the crowd, chest puffed in pride. Our family has tradition. Having a son is a blessing. This woman brings nothing but misfortune. Benny bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She wanted to run, to vanish, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. This was enough, more than enough. From the far end of the market, someone came running. Iodel, her husband. He had just rushed over from the mechanic workshop after hearing there was trouble. His shirt was stained with oil, his face dusty, but his eyes widened in horror at the scene unfolding. Mama, why are you shouting in public like this? Iodel said, reaching to pull her back. Mama Ronk slapped his hand away. Don't interfere. We fed her for 4 years. 4 years, and she still can't give us a son. Iodel turned to Benny. She stood like a statue, the basket slipping half the chicken already fallen to the ground. Her lips were pale, her eyes red as if she'd cried 100 times before arriving here. Benny. Honey, are you okay? He asked softly. She lifted her head. Just 1 second, but it stabbed straight into his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was the final collapse of someone who had endured too much for too long. "Okay," Benny repeated, her voice cracked and hoarse. "Do you think a person can be okay after being humiliated in front of 100 people?" Iodel couldn't reply. Mama Rock spoke again, pouring oil into the fire. "She can't give you a son. Why defend her?" A small girl selling oranges raised her hand timidly. "But sir, do you love her? Why don't you protect her then?" The market went silent again. The child's question shot straight through Iodel. He stammered, "This is a family matter. Not something everyone should." Benny cut him off. Her voice was quiet, but it drowned out everything. "You don't have to protect me." Iodel stared at her, stunned. And for the first time in her life, in front of her husband, her mother-in-law, and the entire market, Benny let the basket drop. It hit the ground with a dull thud. "I will protect myself," she said. "And I will protect our daughter from this poison." Mama Rock scoffed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Benny straightened her back, lifted her chin. Her face was wet, but her eyes no longer trembled. "It means I'm leaving your house, today." Iodel froze. "Benny, wait." "No," she said. "I've been treated like a servant, like a baby-making machine, like a burden. But I am a human being, Iodel. A human being who deserves respect." The entire market watched as she walked away. Each step was a chain breaking, each step freeing a piece of her soul long trapped. Several women rushed to her side, touching her arm gently. "You did the right thing. You're strong." "Benny, no one deserves that treatment." Mama Ronk stood still, speechless for the first time in years, because she realized her own words had just cost her son the most valuable thing he had. Benny didn't look back. Sometimes to rediscover yourself, you must leave behind the places that turned you into someone you no longer recognize. The air in the Ijibu market felt torn apart by the words that had just exploded from Mama Ronka's mouth. Every pair of eyes stayed locked on Benny, the daughter-in-law who had endured 4 years of humiliation, now standing frozen before the crowd, her heart heavy as stone. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Benny didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She didn't back away. She just stood there, breathing hard, as if the weight of the entire world was pressing down on her chest. She tried to turn away, tried to swallow her rage, the kind that had been trapped inside her for far too long. But Mama Ronk's words kept hammering inside her skull. "Bad luck. Feeding you has been a waste." "Enough." Benny turned toward the fish stall beside her. Her hand shaking more from pain than anger reached out and grabbed the large knife resting on the wooden board. The blade, still smeared with fish scales, glinted under the late afternoon sun. Everything that followed erupted like an explosion. The nearest people screamed, "Dear God, stop her. She's lost it." But Benny heard nothing. Her ears roared. Blood throbbed in her temples. The world shrank to the sound of her own heart, wild, broken, frantic. She lunged forward. The fish seller stumbled back in terror, falling into a pile of plastic tubs. A spice vendor shrieked. Children burst into tears and scattered in every direction. Iodel shouted her name, "Benny! Stop!" But Benny didn't stop. "Today!" She screamed, her voice ripping out of a heart pushed past its final limit. "Today you won't torture me anymore." She charged toward Mama Ronk, the knife flashing. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Mama Ronk's face drained of color. Instinctively, she backed away, her eyes widening in a fear she rarely showed. Benny, what are you doing?" she stammered. But Benny could see nothing except the woman who had crushed her spirit, piece by cruel piece. Mama Ronk tripped over a huge basket of yams with a loud thud. She fell backward onto the red earth, hands splayed out, dust rising around her. The entire market held its breath. Iodel tried to rush forward, but a wood seller grabbed him. "Son, don't. You'll only make her panic more." Benny now stood right before her mother-in-law. The distance between the blade and Mama Ronk's throat was no more than a hand's length. Sunlight hit the knife, making it gleam like a streak of lightning. Mama Ronk stared up, her eyes stripped of pride, stripped of authority. Only fear remained. Benny, don't do something foolish." The crowded market froze like stone statues. No one dared to move. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The knife trembled in Benny's hand. Not from fear, but from the tidal wave of pain crashing inside her after years of silence. Her lips parted. 4 years. 4 years of living like a shadow in your house. 4 years without a single day of respect from you. On the ground, Mama Ronk shook violently. Benny raised the knife higher. Voices erupted around them. "Stop. Don't do something you'll regret. You're not a killer, child." But Benny took another step. A meat seller placed a hand over her heart and whispered, "We are witnessing the end of suffering." Iodel finally broke free from the people restraining him. He rushed forward and dropped to his knees between the two women who meant everything to him. "Benny, I beg you, look at me." Benny clutched the knife, her breath breaking apart. Iodel reached out, his hand trembling, barely touching hers, gentle enough for her to feel his warmth without startling her. "You're not the kind of person who does this," he said, voice cracking. "You are strong, but not to harm. You're strong to love, to protect our daughter." Benny bit her lip. And then, for the first time, tears fell. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything she had been forced to hold inside. Her eyes blinked rapidly, as if a dark fog inside her finally began to lift. She looked down at Mama Ronk, a woman who had always stood tall, always demanded obedience, now lying on the ground, fragile and trembling like any other human being. Benny took a deep breath, a long, shuddering breath. Then she lowered the knife. A sharp metallic clang rang out as the blade dropped onto the red earth. The entire market exhaled as one. Mama Ronk pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes glazed with shock, unable to speak. Iodel wrapped his arms around his wife, pulling her close, as if afraid she would vanish if he let go. Benny leaned into his shoulder, tears streaming, though her gaze had softened, no longer blazing with fury. In a voice cracked and broken, she whispered, "I don't want to become someone shaped by pain. I don't want to be anything other than myself." Iodel nodded, his hand gently rubbing her back. Around them, the crowd slowly stood upright again, whispering, wiping tears, some praying under their breath. The evening sun fell across the scene like a reminder that no matter how violent the storm, the light could still return. But among all the watching faces, one person still hadn't stood up. Mama Ronk. She stared at the knife lying no more than a hand's width from her throat. And for the first time in her entire life, she understood that there are boundaries which, once crossed, can shake even the hardest heart. The sound of the fallen knife was still echoing when another noise rose from the far end of the market, heavy, frantic footsteps, like someone racing to stop a disaster before it was too late. It was Cunnel. His motorcycle was still running in the middle of the road. He had abandoned it and sprinted straight into the crowd surrounding the chaos. The smell of dust, engine oil, and raw fear mixed into a storm inside his chest. When he finally saw what was happening at the center of the circle, he froze. Benny, his wife, was kneeling on the ground, her face pale, her hand still trembling after dropping the knife. Behind her, Mama Ronk was on the dirt, one hand clutching her neck, the other bracing herself, eyes wide with shock. Cunnel couldn't breathe. "Abini, what are you doing?" His voice cracked, shattering like glass on stone. The entire market fell silent again. Benny lifted her head. Her eyes were bloodshot. Tears ran down her face, mixing with the red sand and forming faint streaks on the ground. "Cunnel," she whispered, but her voice caught as if someone were squeezing her throat. "You never saw what your mother did to me." Cunnel felt as though something had slammed into his chest. He looked at his mother, the woman always so firm, so unshaken, so powerful, now trembling like a soaked leaf. Mama Ronk grabbed Kunnal's shirt as he knelt beside her. She wanted to kill me. She gasped, her voice breaking for the first time in years. People murmured around them, but no one dared step closer. They all understood this was no longer chaos. This was a family collapsing right in front of them. Kunnal turned to Abeni. His eyes weren't angry, not accusing. They were full of pain. "You," he whispered, sounding like a man who had run too far, and still hadn't reached where he needed to be. "How could you suffer this much? And I didn't know." Abeni burst into louder sobs like a child finally being asked, "Does it hurt?" She held her head, her voice breaking apart. "You go to work. You're never home. You don't see your mother insult me every single day. You don't hear her call me cursed, useless. You don't see her shame me in front of everyone. You don't hear my tears every night." Kunnal reached out with a trembling hand and gently picked up the knife from the ground. He set it aside, as if trying to erase the weapon that had almost destroyed his entire family. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but unbearably heavy. "Both of you, you're both my family." Mama Ronk looked up at her son. "Kunnal, you must believe me. She snapped. The words hit Abeni so hard she flinched. "I snapped?" she repeated, laughing through her tears, a laugh so broken it scraped her throat. "You say I snapped. But do you even know why?" Kunnal placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her. "Abeni, breathe. I'm here now. I won't let anyone hurt you again." But the words came far too late. She looked at him, her eyes holding 4 years of agony. "You've never protected me." Kunnal froze. He opened his mouth any words, but nothing came out. Mama Ronk turned her face away, unable to meet her daughter-in-law's gaze. Inside her eyes was fear. And something else she tried to hide, regret. Kunnal took a deep breath, then rose to his feet between the two women, pulling him in opposite directions. He spoke, voice cracked but clear. "I can't let this continue. I can't let my mother hurt. And I can't let my wife die on the inside every day." Mama Ronk looked at him, eyes reddening. "Kunnal, are you choosing her over me?" Abeni shut her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. It wasn't a new question. Mama Ronk had thrown it at her dozens of times before, each time using it to wound her. But today, the question felt like the final cut. Kunnal crouched again between them, resting his hands on his knees like a man completely drained. He whispered, voice breaking like clay shattering on stone, "I'm not choosing anyone. I just want this family not to fall apart." Wind swept through the market, carrying red dust and the heavy scent of incoming rain. Vendors looked at one another, some wiping tears. An old yam seller whispered, "So much pain. But they still have a chance. They haven't lost each other yet." Kunnal turned to his wife first. He cupped her face gently, forcing her to look into his eyes. "I'm sorry for not seeing your pain. I'm sorry for not standing between you two, so you wouldn't have to suffer alone. I'm sorry for letting you get close to this knife." Abeni sobbed, her cries rattling her entire body. Kunnal looked deeper into her eyes and said something that made the whole crowd shiver. "I don't care if you ever give me a son or not. The only thing I'm afraid of is losing you." Mama Ronk shifted, her expression changing, but she said nothing. No one said anything. All that filled the air was the desperate crying of a broken wife, the trembling breath of a mother-in-law who had just stared death in the face, and the shattered breathing of a man caught between two storms he didn't know how to calm. Kunnal whispered, almost to himself, "Oh God, what have we become? What have we done to each other?" Night fell over Ogun State like a thick black cloth, heavy and suffocating, swallowing every sound in its path. The Ajibu market had closed. Its daytime chaos dissolved into silence, leaving only the chirping of insects echoing in the darkness. Abeni walked home alone. No one followed her. No one called after her. Not because they didn't care, but because everyone understood that this woman needed to be alone more than anything else. The small wooden door creaked when she pushed it open. The lingering smell of smoke from the cooking fire, the scent of damp clothes that hadn't fully dried, the earthy smell of the floor, all of it blended into what she called home, even though many nights this house suffocated her more than it comforted her. When the door closed behind her, the house sank into complete silence. Benny leaned against the wall, her legs giving out. Then she slid down onto the floor. Tears fell this time without sobs, without anger, without bitterness. Just exhaustion. A deep, soul-draining exhaustion. "How did everything end up like this?" she whispered. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and stood up like someone walking out of a storm. She stepped into the bedroom, the small room where she slept with her daughter every night. She looked at the simple bamboo bed, the thin, faded blue blanket, the old mat with its frayed corners. She sat on the edge of the bed, hollow inside. Then, out of habit, she pulled the mat aside to lie down, hoping sleep could rescue her for a few hours from the reality that had just shattered around her. But as she lifted the mat, fup, a corner of an old yellowed paper slipped to the floor. Benny startled. She bent down and picked it up. The paper was aged, its edges torn like it had been folded and unfolded countless times. Her heart began to beat faster. She opened it carefully, as if holding something fragile. The moment she saw the handwriting, her entire body went still. That handwriting. There was no mistaking it. It was Mama Ronk's. Benny blinked, unable to believe what she was holding. Was it written by someone else in the house? Was it meant for her husband, or for her? She sat down slowly, placing the letter in her lap, her hands trembling as if she'd just stepped out of a fever. The room was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She inhaled deeply and opened the letter. The first line struck her like a blow. "To Colonel, my son." Benny's chest tightened. She swallowed the salty rise of tears and continued. "If one day I can no longer speak, I want you to know this." Her hand flew to her mouth. This was not the kind of letter a mother-in-law wrote. Benny is stronger than you think. She hides her sadness well, but her heart is covered in scars. Scars not from life, but from my words. Benny nearly dropped the letter. No, this couldn't be. Not from the woman who had humiliated her for years. She kept reading, her vision blurring. "I don't know how to love her. I don't know how to praise. I don't know how to hold someone. I only know how to hurt people. That is my fault." Benny's hands shook violently. "She did not give you a son, but that is not her fault. Not having a son doesn't make her less than anyone. It only makes me more afraid." "Afraid? Mama Ronk afraid?" Benny clutched the letter, trying to understand. "You know I lost your father because he had no male heir. The whole village mocked me. They called me cursed. I hated that feeling. And I was selfish to pour that fear onto Benny." A tear fell onto the edge of the paper, smudging the ink slightly. Benny covered her mouth, trying and failing to hold back her sobs. Each sentence was a knife turning over all the truth she thought she knew about Mama Ronk. Love her. Do not be like me. Do not leave her alone in this house. Benny's entire body softened, like someone had squeezed her heart and then let go, leaving her breathless. The final line sent her into tears. "One day, she will leave this house because of how cruel I am. When that day comes, do not blame her." Benny pressed the letter against her chest, her whole body trembling. She cried like she had never cried before, not because of today's pain, but because of the truth unraveling inside her. Mama Ronk knew. Mama Ronk understood. Mama Ronk regretted. But she couldn't say it out loud. Maybe she had hidden the letter here beneath the mat so Cunnel would find it someday. Or because she feared she would never get the chance to make things right. Benny curled up on the bed, clutching the letter, her tears soaking the pillow. Outside, the night wind howled, as if trying to sweep away the chaos of the day. But in that small room, Benny saw more clearly than ever, within even the coldest people. There is a hidden, fragile corner no one ever sees, and sometimes a single hidden letter can change the entire course of a life. The Nigerian oil lamp flickered in the corner of the room, its weak yellow glow casting long, trembling shadows on the clay walls like Abeni's own heart in this moment. She sat on the bamboo bed, holding the letter with trembling hands. Every word touched a place deep inside her, one no one had ever seen. "Colonel, my son." The opening line tightened her throat. This wasn't a letter meant for her. It was for Colonel Mama Ronk's son. This girl is stronger than she pretends to be. But her heart is full of scars more than you realize. Abeni stared at the handwriting, seeing a version of herself she always hid. A woman who smiled to cover the pain, who stayed silent to avoid conflict, who carried every wound alone so no one else had to. And Mama Ronk had seen it, for how long? She read on, her eyes stinging. If there is anyone in this house who needs love, it is her. A shaky breath escaped Abeni's chest. Who would ever believe that Mama Ronk, the toughest woman in the entire village, would write something so gentle? She who had been chased with a knife. She who had been insulted for years. She who had been called cursed and worthless. And yet inside this woman, there was space for tenderness. Love her, because she has no one else but you. Abeni pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to hold back her tears. Why would she write something like this? The room didn't answer. Only the oil lamp crackled softly, as if it understood her trembling. Abeni felt weak, as though the letter had drained the last of her strength. She set it on her lap, staring at it like a long-buried secret that had finally clawed its way back into the light, ready to overturn everything she thought she knew. She hated me. She cursed me. She called me useless. But this? A confession? A plea for forgiveness? A voice she never had the courage to say aloud? Abeni lifted the letter again, reading slowly, afraid to miss even one meaning. If there is anyone who needs to be loved, it is her. She closed her eyes. Tears fell again. She knew everything I went through. Why didn't she say anything? Why did she leave me alone in all of it? A gust of night wind slid through the crack under the door, making the letter flutter lightly, almost like it was breathing. Abeni pulled her knees to her chest and hugged herself. Her quiet sobbing filled the room, small in sound, but overflowing with pain, questions, and everything she could not explain. Then a thought struck her, a twist so sharp it made goosebumps rise from her neck down to her arms. The letter wasn't new. It was old, very old. At least over a year. She held it closer to the lamp, examining it. The edges were torn, the ink slightly faded, the folds worn from being opened many times, and when she turned it over, Abeni stopped breathing. There was another line on the back, messy, rushed, almost like it was written in fear. Abeni must never know about this letter. Mama Ronk. Abeni's hands shook violently. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst. Oh my God, a secret. A buried truth. A confession no one was ever meant to see. She wrote this letter not to excuse herself, not to seek forgiveness, but because. Abeni swallowed hard, her chest tightening unbearably. She understood now. Mama Ronk had seen her suffering. She knew the pain came from her own actions, but instead of changing, she wrote a letter because she didn't know how to apologize, didn't know how to speak love, didn't know how to admit wrong. And the part that broke Abeni the most, at one point, Mama Ronk intended for Colonel to know the truth. But then she hid the letter away, choosing instead to continue playing the rigid, unyielding mother-in-law because that was the only role she knew how to play. Abeni placed the letter down, her whole body trembling. She stood, but her legs buckled, forcing her to grab the wall for support. She knew everything. She didn't hate me the way I thought. She was weaker than I ever imagined. The Ogun night remained pitch black outside, but inside Abeni, a different light had flickered on, the light of truth. The light of a mother-in-law whose heart she had never seen. A heart that didn't know how to love properly, didn't know how to speak properly, but somehow still loved. A distorted love. A broken love, but still love. Benny sat down again, placing the letter over her heart. For the first time since the chaos in the market, her pain was no longer the only thing she felt. She thought she was hurting too, in her own way. And in that moment, the moment the twist cracked everything open, Benny knew their confrontation was not the end. It was only the beginning. The night in Ogun State was colder than usual. The wind slipped through the red earth rooftops, snaked through the narrow window gaps, and carried the dampness of an approaching rainstorm. Connell's small house stood still, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Benny stood on the porch. There were no tears left on her face, but her eyelids were still swollen, her throat still tight, as though a heavy stone sat inside it. Mama Ronk's letter rested in her hands, creased and softened by the tears that had soaked it. She heard footsteps from a distance, the dragging sound of her mother-in-law's slippers on the dirt. Connell's hurried breathing. The bamboo gate creaked open slowly, and they appeared. Connell still had road dust clinging to his shirt, his eyes red from crying and running all the way home. Mama Ronk walked behind him, her hair messy, her posture stripped of every ounce of the firmness she usually carried. She looked at Benny, then quickly lowered her gaze, unable to meet her. The three of them stood in front of the house. No one spoke. The air was thick, so thick it felt like touching it would make it shatter. Benny tightened her grip on the letter, then held it out, not with anger, not with accusation, but with the trembling hands of someone who had just discovered something far bigger than herself. Her voice was so soft the wind could have carried it away. "You once wanted to love me." Mama Ronk blinked. Benny inhaled deeply, tears welling again, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm sorry for losing control today. I didn't know you had written these words." She placed the letter gently into Mama Ronk's hands. The older woman froze the moment she touched it. She recognized every stroke of her handwriting. She recognized the old folds. She recognized the secret she had hidden because she believed she didn't deserve to say the words out loud. Her hands trembled violently. Then she lifted her head and looked at her daughter-in-law. In that moment, long enough to last a lifetime, Benny saw in her eyes not anger, not pride, but fear. The raw, primal fear of a mother who had been hurt too deeply in her own life and never learned how to love correctly. Mama Ronk's throat tightened. And then, as if the last thread inside her finally snapped, she burst into tears. Not soft tears, but loud, broken, helpless sobs filled with years of stubbornness and the prison of her own coldness. She covered her face like a child. "Benny, I hurt you so much," her voice cracked. "But not because I hated you. It's because I carried my fear for too long, until it turned into poison." Benny rushed forward, catching her before she collapsed. No one in the entire village had ever seen Mama Ronk cry like this. Connell watched the two women, the two people he loved more than anything, holding each other, and his chest tightened painfully. He stepped closer and knelt beside them. His voice trembled, his eyes wet. "From now on, our family has to learn not to hurt each other anymore. We must learn to talk about our pain, instead of letting silence kill us." Benny looked at her husband, the man who had just watched their marriage nearly fall apart in a single afternoon. And she saw in his eyes not just love, but a promise. A late promise, but a sincere one. Mama Ronk lifted her hand shaking and touched Benny's cheek, for the first time in 4 years. She spoke softly, slowly, each word heavy with truth. "You are not cursed. I am the cursed one, for failing to cherish you." Benny broke down, hugging her tightly. Connell wrapped his arms around both of them. The three of them leaned into one another right there on the doorstep. No one said anything more. They just cried. Cried for the years of misunderstanding. Cried for the harsh words no one truly meant. cried for the days they hurt each other without knowing how to stop. The night wind swept through the Nigerian village, carrying the scent of earth, mango trees, wood smoke, the scent of life. It carried away the shouting from the afternoon. It carried away the image of the knife glinting under the sun. It carried away everything that had pushed this family to the edge of collapse, leaving behind only a mother learning how to apologize, a daughter-in-law learning how to forgive, and a husband learning how to stand in the middle with a wider heart. That night, their small house was no longer a place of pain. It became the place where healing finally began.